In the heart of the Arizona desert, a young police officer is trapped inside a burning car, her hands bound, her screams swallowed by the wind. As the flames rise, a former Army SEAL and his German shepherd race through the sand. But when they reach her, a figure stands in the fire, a woman untouched by the heat, smiling like she's seen heaven burn. The soldier calls out, but the fire bends toward him like it obeys her. In that moment, he realizes this isn't a rescue, it's a ritual. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The sun over northern Arizona was a merciless God, hanging low and wide above a wasteland of red dust and fractured stone. Heat shimmered off every surface, turning the air itself into a living thing that pressed down upon lungs and thought alike. The only sound was the distant hum of cicadas and the slow growl of an engine cutting through silence. Sergeant Caleb "Cal" Thorne guided his Humvee across the uneven terrain with the precision of a man who no longer trusted the world to surprise him. He was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose presence filled space even when he said nothing. His tan uniform clung to his sweat-dampened back, and beneath his tactical vest his heart moved with a quiet, steady rhythm that came only from years of surviving when others had not. His dark brown hair was cut short to military regulation, silver streaks glinting near his temples. A thin scar ran from the corner of his jaw to the edge of his neck, a faint reminder of a roadside explosion years ago that had killed his closest friend. Since that day, silence had been both his comfort and his punishment. In the rear compartment, lying perfectly still within a reinforced canine kennel, was Maverick, his 5-year-old German shepherd. The dog was large, even by breed standards, nearly 90 pounds of muscle wrapped in sable-black fur that shimmered with bronze where sunlight touched it. His amber eyes were alert, intelligent, almost human in their watchfulness. Maverick had been trained for reconnaissance, tracking, and attack, but what made him exceptional wasn't obedience. It was intuition. He didn't just follow orders. He read moods, sensed danger, and moved like a creature that could smell emotion itself. Between Cal and Maverick, there was no hierarchy, only an unspoken covenant. One trusted the world through instinct, the other through scars. The desert wind battered against the Humvee's frame. The digital thermometer on the dashboard read 100, but the air felt hotter. Cal reached up to wipe the sweat from his brow, eyes narrowing behind darkened lenses. He wasn't supposed to be here alone. His team had been rotated out 2 weeks ago, but he had volunteered for an extended solo patrol. Officially, it was to monitor abandoned smuggling routes along the border. Unofficially, it was to keep moving until the ghosts of his past tired of chasing him. He thought of Anna, the child he hadn't saved 3 years earlier during a hostage extraction gone wrong. A girl with red ribbons in her hair who had smiled even as she'd been led away. Her name was a scar that never closed. Cal exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Maverick stirred, sensing his tension. Then the dog lifted his head. His ears twitched once, twice. A low growl rippled through the cabin, a warning. Cal glanced into the mirror. "What is it, boy?" he muttered, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved, only sand, thorny shrubs, and distant hills, dissolving in heat haze. Then Maverick's growl deepened, turning into a sharp bark. Then another. He lunged forward inside the cage, muscles rigid. Cal slowed the vehicle, the tires crunching over gravel. He rolled down the window, and instantly the smell hit him, thick, sweet, chemical, gasoline. His pulse quickened. It wasn't from a vehicle leak. It was stronger, rawer, and close. He braked hard, dust rising in a swirling halo around the Humvee. Maverick was barking furiously now, claws scraping metal. "Easy," Cal murmured, already stepping out. The heat struck him like a physical blow. He scanned the expanse through squinted eyes, and a faint glint, metal catching the sunlight, flashed from behind a cluster of jagged red rocks. He signaled Maverick to stay and moved cautiously toward it, his boots sinking into the soft dust. The smell grew thicker with every step. Beyond the rocks lay a half-buried sedan, its paint scorched pale by years of sun. The car sat tilted in the dirt, and from beneath it spread a dark halo of gasoline. Cal's throat tightened. Inside, through the smudged window, he saw movement, a flicker of pale skin. He wiped a streak of grime from the glass and froze. A woman was bound to the driver's seat. Her wrists were tied behind her, her mouth sealed with duct tape. She wore a torn police uniform, the dark blue now stained with dust and sweat. Her name tag was half melted but legible, Riley Dawn. She looked young, late 20s maybe, and even through exhaustion, her features carried a fierce defiance. High cheekbones, brown hair pulled back in a loose braid, skin freckled from sun exposure. Cal could see the faint rise and fall of her chest. She was alive, but barely. He circled to the rear of the car, testing the handle, locked. He reached for his multi-tool, but before he could act, a voice drifted from the ridge above. "She's pretty, isn't she?" Cal turned, gun drawn in an instant. Standing atop the rocks was Rhonda, a gaunt woman in her mid-30s, tall and wiry, with sharp angles that seemed carved rather than grown. Her sun-bleached hair was tied in a rough ponytail, and her denim shorts were stained dark from sweat. Her eyes, a faded blue like the desert sky, were completely emotionless. In one hand, she held a red gas can. In the other, a silver Zippo lighter. "Drop it," Cal ordered. She smiled, thin, humorless. "You're too late. Some things need cleansing." Her voice cracked like dry grass underfoot. "Drop it now." But she didn't. She tilted the lighter, flipping it open with a deliberate snap. The sound sliced through the heat like a gunshot. Maverick erupted from the Humvee with a roar of fury. The latch had been triggered by Cal's remote, the K9 door popper, a reflex more than thought. What followed was motion, stripped of sound. Maverick hit Rhonda like a living projectile, 90 pounds of muscle and intent. The lighter flew from her hand, spinning into the dust. She screamed, not from pain, but from rage, thrashing as the dog pinned her to the ground. Cal ran forward, kicking the Zippo away and holstering his gun. He yanked the gas can from her grasp and hurled it aside. Rhonda's face twisted into a snarl. "She was supposed to burn," she hissed. "They all were." Her voice cracked again, somewhere between fury and grief. Cal saw madness, but also something hollow, like a person who had been emptied of meaning long ago. He cuffed her wrists, ignoring her curses, and turned back to the car. The gasoline stung his eyes and throat. He broke the window with his elbow, reached inside, and tore the duct tape from Riley's mouth. She gasped, choking on air. "You're safe," Cal said quietly. "You're safe now." Her lips trembled. I was tracking them," she whispered hoarsely. She took me when I got too close. She said she wanted justice." Cal didn't ask for details, not yet. He pulled her out carefully, supporting her as her knees buckled. Maverick stood beside them, chest heaving, eyes never leaving Rhonda, who now lay in the dirt, muttering to herself. As the wind shifted, the smell of gasoline began to fade, replaced by the dry mineral scent of dust and sunburned stone. Cal guided Riley toward the Humvee. Maverick followed, close enough to brush against Riley's leg, as if reassuring her that she was among the living. For the first time in months, Cal felt something stir beneath the layers of weariness, a small, fragile reminder that he could still make a difference. Maybe Anna's ghost wasn't haunting him. Maybe it had been guiding him here. He glanced once more at the woman tied to the ground, her pale hair fluttering in the heat. "Some things don't need cleansing," he murmured. Then he looked toward the horizon, where the desert shimmered like liquid glass, and whispered to himself, "Some things just need saving." The night after the rescue fell over the desert like a cooling hand after fever. A temporary command post had been set up at a decommissioned airfield 20 miles from where the sedan had been found. The place was quiet, except for the whirring of a portable generator and the occasional bark from Maverick, who sat at the edge of a spotlight's halo, his golden eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the fence line. His fur gleamed under the floodlights, and every few minutes he would flick an ear, alert to sounds that no human could detect. He was calmer now, but the air around him still vibrated with that restrained energy of a creature that had recently fought for its life, and someone else's. Inside one of the canvas tents, Sergeant Caleb Cal Thorne sat at a metal table, his forearms resting on the cold surface, the veins along his hands standing out. His tactical vest was gone, replaced by a faded green undershirt that clung to his frame. He had showered, but the faint smell of gasoline still lingered in his nose, seared there by memory. Across from him, Officer Riley Dawn sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, her wrists bandaged, the duct tape marks still visible beneath white gauze. The harsh overhead light flattened the color from her face, but her brown eyes, restless, fierce, remained alive. She was no victim now. She sat upright, arms crossed beneath the blanket, as if ready to interrogate the world back. A medic named Corporal Ben Holt stepped inside, a compact man in his early 40s, with sun-baked skin and sandy blonde hair shaved close to the skull. He had the posture of someone who'd seen too many men die and refused to flinch anymore. His voice was low and gruff, marked by years of desert dust and cheap cigarettes. "Vitals are stable," he said, glancing at Riley. "Dehydration, mild trauma. She'll live." Then, looking at Cal, he added, "You, on the other hand, look like a man running on fumes." Cal gave him a thin smile. "Been running on those for years." When Holt left, Riley spoke for the first time since the medics had pulled her from the car. Her voice was rough, but it carried an edge of control. "That woman, Rhonda, she wasn't acting alone. You know that, right?" Cal leaned back. "You're certain?" "She's part of something bigger. A group I've been investigating for months. Domestic extremists targeting law enforcement and military personnel. Her husband used to work in demolition. Taught her how to handle fuel and detonation. She called it purification." Riley's expression hardened. "They've already killed 2 officers before me. They believe they're erasing corruption by fire." Cal rubbed his jaw, feeling the ghost of that old scar. The words, erasing corruption, stuck to him like burrs. He thought of the desert, the endless emptiness, the way fire could erase not only corruption, but also memory. A radio crackled outside. Maverick barked once, sharp and alert. Cal stood instantly, motioning Riley to stay. He stepped out of the tent, the desert air biting cold after sunset. 2 soldiers from the base were unloading a prisoner transport vehicle. Rhonda was inside, wrists shackled, hair tangled like desert brush. She smiled when she saw Cal, a slow, broken curve of lips that was neither defiance nor fear. Something colder. A tall man in uniform approached, clipboard under one arm. Major Elias Rourke, the mission's regional overseer, was in his 50s, broad-shouldered but carrying the stiffness of old injuries. His face was sharp and weathered, his salt and pepper beard trimmed neatly, and his gray eyes had the permanent squint of a man accustomed to sunlight and lies. "Sergeant Thorne," he greeted curtly, "heard you pulled a miracle out of the sand." "Didn't feel like one, sir." Rourke nodded toward Rhonda. "She hasn't said a word since we picked her up, except to request a Bible and a mirror. You ask me, that's not repentance, it's ritual." Cal frowned. "A mirror?" "She said she wants to see what justice looks like." The major's tone was dry. "Psych team's inbound tomorrow. You'll brief them." As Rourke left, Cal looked at Rhonda again. She sat inside the transport, wrists raw against metal cuffs, eyes pale and distant. She mouthed something at him, 3 silent words, but the glass between them muffled everything. He couldn't read her lips, but something about her calm terrified him more than any weapon could. Later, when the base quieted, Cal found Riley sitting outside beside Maverick. The dog rested his head on her lap, eyes half closed, enjoying the rare moment of peace. Riley's hair, clean now, glowed chestnut under the floodlights. She looked smaller, without the uniform, wrapped in an olive blanket. But there was strength in the way she sat, shoulders squared, chin raised. "Can't sleep?" Cal asked, pulling up a folding chair. "I don't think I remember how," she said, after a pause. "I owe you my life." Cal shook his head. "No one owes anyone out here. You would have done the same." "I'm not so sure." Her eyes lowered to Maverick. "He didn't even hesitate. Neither did you." "That's what training does," Cal said softly. Then, after a long silence, "Sometimes I think it's not bravery. It's just muscle memory of people we couldn't save." Riley looked at him sharply, recognizing the weight in his tone. "Anna?" she asked quietly. Cal stiffened. He hadn't spoken that name aloud in years. "You read my file." "I had to. When they told me who pulled me out, I looked you up. The girl in Fallujah, right?" He exhaled. "Yeah, the one I didn't reach in time." Riley nodded slowly. "Maybe tonight you did?" Her words hung between them, soft as dust. Maverick lifted his head, sensing the shift in energy, and pressed closer to Cal's leg. The gesture grounded him. The following morning, Major Rourke assembled the small team in the command tent. Rhonda had been transferred to an interrogation cell on site. The psych officer, Dr. Sarah Kellen, a woman in her early 40s, stood by the table reviewing the file. She was tall and lean, with sharp green eyes behind rimless glasses and hair the color of iron pulled into a severe bun. Her voice was calm, deliberate, and utterly unshakable, the voice of someone who'd stared into the minds of killers for too long and found patterns instead of horror. "She's showing signs of dissociative psychosis," Sarah said, flipping a page, "but there's structure underneath. Every delusion follows a script." Cal glanced at the monitor showing the live feed of Rhonda in her cell. The woman was sitting cross-legged, humming softly. On the wall behind her, she'd drawn something with her own blood, an insignia shaped like a triangle encircling a flame. Sarah leaned closer to the screen. That symbol, that's not random. I've seen it before, in the report about the New Haven refinery attack. Same cult signature. Rourke's jaw tightened. You're saying this isn't over? Sarah nodded. I'm saying it's barely begun. Cal felt Maverick shift beside him, restless, a low growl forming in his throat, as if echoing the unease that rippled through the room. Outside, the wind began to rise again, whistling across the flat expanse of desert like a warning. When Cal left the tent, he found Riley waiting near the Humvee. She was dressed now in borrowed fatigues, her hair tied back, her badge clipped to her chest. They told me she's talking, Riley said. Cal hesitated. Not exactly talking, more like waiting. For what? Cal glanced toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise, turning the sand into molten gold. He didn't answer. Maverick barked once, sharp and uneasy, and far beyond the airfield fence, barely visible through the glare, a thin column of smoke rose into the sky. Too thin to be a campfire, too dark to be dust. Riley followed his gaze. That's not supposed to be there, is it? No, Cal said quietly, his hand resting on Maverick's head. It isn't. And just like that, the brief peace they'd found dissolved into the wind. The column of smoke rose like a wound in the horizon. It wasn't a wildfire. Cal knew that the moment he saw its shape, thin, controlled, almost deliberate. Fires in the desert never behaved that neatly unless someone wanted them to. By the time the Humvee rolled out of the forward command post, the sun was still low enough to throw long shadows across the red earth. Riley Dawn sat beside him in full tactical gear, borrowed from base supply, the creases still sharp. Her hair was tied in a tight ponytail beneath a black cap, her expression focused but haunted. The desert sun hadn't yet softened her skin from hospital pallor, and the bruise along her jaw was a dark reminder of the night she'd almost died. Behind them, Maverick stood alert, forepaws braced against the steel grate, nostrils flaring with anticipation. His ears twitched as though listening to a frequency beyond human reach. They drove in silence for the first few miles, the tires grinding over gravel. Cal's hands gripped the steering wheel with the steadiness of habit, though his mind kept replaying Rhonda's last expression in the holding cell. That eerie calm, the kind only zealots wore before disaster. You shouldn't be out here yet, he said finally, eyes fixed ahead. Riley's gaze stayed on the smoke plume. You'll need a witness if this ties back to her group. Besides, I can shoot straight. Cal almost smiled. You think you can outshoot a SEAL? No, she said, voice steady, but I can outthink one. A faint grin crept across his weathered face. For a moment, he forgot the ghosts, but Maverick's low growl pulled him back. The dog's eyes were locked on the horizon, and that was warning enough. The smoke led them to an abandoned mining outpost, 3 corrugated steel shacks, a water tower collapsed in on itself, and a pickup truck half buried in sand. The smell hit them before the heat did. Burned fuel, oil, and something else, plastic, maybe rubber. They dismounted cautiously, rifles raised. Maverick moved ahead, nose low, tail stiff. Cal scanned the wreckage. One of the shacks still smoldered, and the blackened shell of a generator hummed with dying electricity. Then Riley saw it. A human shape slumped against the wall, half covered in soot. She rushed forward, crouching beside the body. "He's alive!" she shouted. The man was young, maybe late 20s, with olive skin blistered from the heat and a shaved head. His clothes were singed combat fatigues without insignia. Around his neck hung a crude medallion, a triangle, encircling a flame, just like the one Rhonda had drawn with her blood. Cal knelt beside her. "He's one of them." The man stirred, lips cracking open. His eyes were dark, feverish, yet filled with a strange peace. "You shouldn't have stopped her," he whispered. "Stopped who?" Cal demanded. "The fire cleanses. The fire calls more of us." Then his body convulsed once, twice, and went still. They exchanged a grim look. Riley wiped soot from her face, her voice low. "He wasn't lying." Maverick's ears perked. He barked sharply toward the ridgeline. Cal followed his gaze and caught movement, 2 figures darting between rocks. "Contact! 2 o'clock!" He swung his rifle and fired a warning shot that sent dust exploding behind them. The figures scattered, vanishing into the jagged terrain. Moments later, a black drone, small, agile, and fast, rose into the air from behind the ridge. Its red light blinked twice before it zipped east, away from them. Cal cursed under his breath. They were recording us. Back at the command post hours later, Major Elias Rourke waited by the debrief table. His expression was grim, his left arm now strapped in a sling from an old wound aggravated by stress. Dr. Sarah Kellen stood beside him, scrolling through a laptop feed. "That symbol again," she murmured. "It's spreading like a brand. I've intercepted chatter. There's talk of a cleansing night. No date, just soon." Cal folded his arms. "How big?" Sarah adjusted her glasses. "From what little we've deciphered, nationwide cells, loosely connected but sharing doctrine. Fire as rebirth, law enforcement as corruption." She hesitated, then added, "The man you found wasn't supposed to die there. That outpost was a relay point." Riley frowned. "Relay for what?" "Broadcast," Sarah said simply. "They're sending something, and whatever it is, Rhonda's at the center of it." Before Cal could respond, an intelligence tech rushed into the tent. Young, lanky, uniform too large for his thin frame. His name tag read Specialist Owen Price, no older than 22, with a mop of dark curls and a nervous energy that made him speak too fast. "Sir, ma'am, signal intercept just came through. Encrypted transmission from the outpost's generator hub. It was piggybacking off a military satellite channel." Rourke's face hardened. "Where's it going?" Price swallowed. "Back here, sir, to this base." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Cal's hand instinctively found Maverick's collar. "So we're not the hunters," he said. "We're the bait." That night, the base was placed under lockdown. Floodlights bathed the perimeter in harsh white, and the desert wind carried the faint metallic scent of impending rain. Inside his quarters, Cal sat on the edge of the bunk, cleaning his weapon with slow, deliberate motions. Riley stood near the window, staring out at the motionless guards. Maverick lay between them, head resting on his paws but eyes open. "They knew we'd find that outpost," Riley said quietly. "That drone wasn't scouting, it was luring." Cal nodded. "They want us nervous, to make us look inward while they move outward." "And Rhonda?" He didn't answer. The question hung between them like static. Somewhere beyond the compound, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the dunes. Hours later, an alarm pierced the night. Cal was on his feet before the second blare. Maverick growled, claws scraping metal. Riley grabbed her sidearm. The loudspeakers crackled to life. All personnel, containment breach in detention Sector 3. Sector 3, Rhonda's cell. They sprinted through the corridor as soldiers flooded from their barracks. Red lights flashed overhead, painting everything in emergency crimson. At the end of the hallway, the reinforced door to the detention block stood open, hinges bent outward as if torn by brute force. Inside, the guards were down. 2 unconscious, 1 bleeding from a head wound. The surveillance screen showed only static. Rhonda was gone. On the wall of her empty cell, written in smeared blood, was a single phrase: "The night begins where light ends." Riley stepped closer, staring at the words. "She wasn't supposed to get out," she whispered. Cal's jaw tightened. "She didn't escape," he said. "She was released." The storm outside broke then, wind shrieking through the hangar doors. Lightning split the desert sky, illuminating the horizon. Far away, too far to reach, but close enough to see, multiple fires burned in perfect symmetry, forming a ring of light around the distant dunes. Maverick barked once, the sound cutting through the thunder like a shot. Cal met Riley's gaze, the reflection of the flames dancing in both their eyes. "This isn't an escape," he said quietly. "It's a signal." The storm had not passed. It had only changed shape. By dawn, the fires seen from the base had grown into distinct beacons, burning on the outer dunes in a perfect ring 20 miles wide. The smoke hung low, a dark ceiling pressing against the horizon. Sergeant Caleb "Cal" Thorne stood on the perimeter wall, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Beside him, Maverick sat silent, his thick coat ruffled by wind, nose twitching with unease. The dog's ears were erect, eyes trained toward the flames that pulsed like a living heartbeat across the desert. Below them, soldiers worked with the mechanical efficiency of panic, loading weapons, checking generators, sealing entry gates. The base had become a fortress surrounded by its own reflection of hell. Riley Dawn appeared behind him, now in a full combat uniform, her face set and pale. She'd slept maybe an hour. Her brown hair was tucked under a tactical helmet, and though exhaustion shadowed her features, her posture was unwavering. "They built it to send a message," she said. "Each fire marks a cell's location. It's ritual, not random." Cal lowered the binoculars. "Then the ritual's incomplete. They're waiting for something or someone." He glanced down at Maverick, who gave a low growl, the sound deep and uneasy. Inside the operations tent, Major Elias Rourke was hunched over a digital map, tracing lines with his good hand. His sleeve was rolled up above the sling, revealing scar tissue that wrapped around his forearm like a pale vine. His graying beard was unkempt now, his fatigue showing through discipline. "They've cut our communications," he said flatly. "Satellite uplinks fried. We're blind beyond a 20-mile radius." Dr. Sarah Kellen stood beside him, her hair slightly undone from sleeplessness, glasses fogged at the corners. Her voice was low but certain. "That's not just interference. Someone inside the base rerouted our feed before the system crashed." Cal frowned. "You think we've got a mole?" Sarah met his eyes. "I think Rhonda had help getting out. No one breaks 3 reinforced locks without clearance codes." A young engineer named Lieutenant James Vale looked up from the server rack at the back of the tent. He was in his early 30s, tall but lean, with sharp cheekbones, pale blonde hair, and fingers that moved with jittery precision over the console keys. He spoke with the clipped rhythm of someone used to arguing with machines. If someone tampered with the feed, I can trace the access point, he said. But I'll need a direct line to the generator hub. Rourke nodded. You've got 30 minutes. After that, we start fallback protocols. Cal and Riley exchanged a look. Fallback means evacuation? She asked. Fallback means we level the base, Rourke said grimly. Outside, the sky dimmed further as ash began to fall like snow. The wind carried a distant hum, almost melodic, as though the fires were chanting in tongues of smoke. Maverick whined softly, pacing near the tent flap. Cal knelt beside him, running a hand through his fur. Easy, partner. We'll find her. An hour later, Vale was deep inside the generator chamber, cables spilling from open panels like veins. Cal, Riley, and Maverick stood guard while sparks flickered in the dark. Got it, Vale muttered, sweat glistening on his temple. Someone uploaded a signal relay through our emergency beacon line. It's broadcasting coordinates. Where to? Cal asked. Vale's screen blinked, resolving into a set of digits. North, exactly 40 miles into the desert. Looks like an old fuel depot. He paused, eyes narrowing. Or what used to be one. Riley's voice was quiet. That's where she's going. Cal nodded. And that's where we'll end it. Major Rourke authorized a 3-person strike team. Cal, Riley, and Maverick. Sarah stayed behind to monitor from the command tent, though her expression betrayed her worry. You'll be walking into their doctrine, she warned. They believe death by flame is ascension. Don't underestimate devotion. It burns longer than fear. The Humvee left the base under a blood-colored sunrise, the sand turning to molten copper beneath the tires. Maverick sat between them, his head resting on Cal's thigh, eyes open and unblinking. The farther they drove, the darker the air became, smoke thickening like a curtain. When they reached the old fuel depot, it was exactly as Vale had said. Collapsed structures, twisted pipes, and a blackened tower rising crooked from the earth. They dismounted, weapons ready. The ground was littered with burned metal and empty canisters marked with the same triangle inside a flame symbol. Maverick sniffed the air, ears flattening. Then he barked twice, sharp and urgent, before bolting toward the shadows behind the tower. "Wait!" Riley called, but Cal followed instinctively. They rounded the corner and froze. Rhonda stood there unarmed, her arms outstretched, palms blackened with soot. Her once blonde hair was streaked with ash, her clothes reduced to rags. Yet her eyes gleamed with unnatural calm, reflecting the flames dancing behind her. Around her, 5 hooded figures knelt in a circle, chanting low. "You came," Rhonda said softly, voice almost tender. "You always do." Cal raised his rifle. "It's over." "No," she said, smiling faintly. "It's beginning. You saw the fires. They're not destruction. They're gates." "Gates to what?" Riley demanded. "To truth, to freedom from rot. You've carried guilt, soldier. You should understand cleansing." Her gaze flicked to Maverick. "And you brought your hound of judgment." Cal's finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't test me." Rhonda's smile widened. "You can't kill what's already offered to the flame." She turned her eyes upward, and that's when Cal saw the timer device strapped to her chest, blinking in steady rhythm. "Move!" he shouted. He tackled Riley behind a concrete barrier as the explosion tore through the air. The world became fire and dust. The blast wave knocked them flat, the sound swallowing everything. When Cal's vision cleared, he saw Maverick limping toward him, one side singed, but alive. The circle of devotees was gone, vaporized. Rhonda's body, too, had vanished in the crater. Riley coughed, pulling herself upright. "She's dead?" Cal stared at the scorched crater. "If she wanted to be." They radioed the base. No response. Static hissed through every channel. Then a new voice broke through, distant but clear. It wasn't Rourke's nor Sarah's. It was Rhonda's. "You cannot stop the night," her voice whispered through the static. "You only light the path for it to follow." Cal froze, staring at the radio, the hairs on his neck rising. Maverick growled low, head turned toward the east, where beyond the horizon faint flickers of new fires began to appear, too many to count. Riley looked at him, face pale. "Cal, tell me that's not real." But he couldn't. The wind shifted, carrying the acrid smell of gasoline once more. And far away, somewhere beneath the rising flames, something began to hum, mechanical, rhythmic, and human-made. Cal exchanged a glance with Maverick, his pulse quickening. Whatever this was, it wasn't over, not even close. The fires burned through the night and into dawn, turning the horizon into an ocean of flame. Cal Thorne stood at the edge of the crater, his uniform scorched, rifle slung across his back, skin streaked with soot. His chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths. The air smelled of iron and smoke. Behind him, Riley Dawn sat on the sand, bandaging her forearm with strips of torn fabric, her face pale but resolute. Beside her, Maverick rested quietly, one hind leg wrapped in gauze from a burn. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, where, faintly, more fires shimmered, like constellations of destruction. The radio beside Cal crackled again, whispering fragments of Rhonda's voice. It was no longer words, just static, laced with breath. Then, finally, silence. Riley looked up. "It's over?" she asked. Cal shook his head. "Not yet." He turned as the roar of helicopter blades broke the stillness. A U-860 Blackhawk descended in a storm of dust. From its open door stepped Major Elias Rourke, his arm still in a sling, but his expression fierce. Behind him followed Dr. Sarah Kellen, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from sleeplessness. Two medics jumped out next, carrying stretchers and oxygen tanks. Rourke's voice thundered through the wind. "We lost 3 outposts overnight, all hit the same way, detonations disguised as signal beacons. Whatever she started, it's spreading." Cal's jaw tightened. "You said it yourself, sir. The fire's a signal. We can still trace it." Sarah stepped closer, kneeling beside Maverick. She ran a careful hand along his bandaged leg. "He shouldn't be standing," she murmured. The dog gave a faint huff of defiance. "He doesn't know how to stop," Cal replied. Rourke crouched near them, his face drawn. "We found fragments of a transmitter at one of the ring fires. It's coded to military frequencies. Ours. Someone inside the network built it." "Vale?" Riley asked sharply. Rourke shook his head. "He's missing?" For a moment, only the wind answered. Then Cal rose, eyes narrowing toward the smoke. "If he's missing, he's not gone. He's following her trail, or leading us into the next trap." By noon, they had tracked Vale's signal to a canyon carved deep into the desert, an old communications relay site buried under decades of sand. The place looked like a graveyard of towers, each one blackened by age and lightning. As the team approached, the air grew unnaturally still. Even the wind refused to cross the threshold. Inside, the complex was half collapsed, corridors lit by emergency lanterns. Cal led the way, flashlights sweeping across rusted steel and faded signage. The echoes of their boots were the only sounds until a low, rhythmic hum began to pulse through the floor. Maverick stiffened, ears back. They reached the control room. Vale was there. He sat in front of a massive console, his hands resting on the keyboard, his face ghostly pale in the monitor's glow. His uniform was torn, his blond hair matted with sweat. But his eyes, once jittery with nervous energy, were eerily calm now. "Vale," Cal said softly, raising his rifle halfway. "Step away from the console." The lieutenant smiled faintly without turning. "You don't understand. She wasn't wrong." Riley moved to flank him. "Rhonda, she's dead." Vale chuckled, the sound brittle. "You saw a body?" "Enough of this," Cal growled. "You're coming with us." Vale finally turned, and the sight stopped them cold. His chest bore a crude triangle tattoo, fresh and bleeding, carved into his skin with something sharp. "The fire doesn't die, Sergeant. It just finds a new vessel." He reached for the console. Cal fired. The bullet struck the metal frame beside Vale's hand, ricocheting into the floor. "Don't!" Cal barked. "You hit that. You light the whole grid." Riley stepped forward, voice trembling. "Vale, listen to me. Whatever she told you, it ends here. Don't make it worse." For a second, the lieutenant's mask cracked. His lips parted, eyes flickering with confusion, fear, maybe guilt. "It's already worse," he whispered. Then, before they could move, he slammed his hand down on the enter key. The monitors erupted in red light. Alarms screamed. On the main screen, coordinates flashed, every major fuel line across the state. Sarah's voice burst over the comms. "It's a chain relay. If the sequence completes, it'll ignite everything connected to the western grid." Cal lunged forward, tackling Vale from the chair. They hit the floor hard, grappling amid cables and debris. The younger man fought with surprising strength, desperation turning him feral. Maverick growled, lunging to pin Vale's arm as Cal wrenched the cable free from the power conduit. Sparks burst, searing their hands. The hum died. Silence returned, thick and absolute. Vale lay gasping, eyes wide. You killed it?" Cal looked down at him. "No, I stopped you." Riley secured the lieutenant's wrists while Sarah's voice came through again. "Cal, whatever you did, it worked. The chain failed to complete, but it's unstable. You need to get out now." They didn't argue. Cal hauled Vale to his feet and ran, Riley close behind, Maverick limping but determined at their side. Behind them, the old relay site began to groan, metal screaming as internal fires caught oxygen. They cleared the canyon mouth just as the first explosion tore through the air. The blast rolled across the sand, throwing them to the ground. When the dust settled, the horizon was clean again. No flames, no smoke, only the scorched silhouette of the canyon fading into heat shimmer. Later, as medevac crews loaded Vale into custody and Rourke secured the perimeter, Cal stood apart, staring into the vast emptiness. Riley joined him, her hair windblown, her eyes tired but alive. "You think it's really over?" "She asked. Cal shook his head. "Fires don't end, they rest." Maverick nudged his hand gently, pressing close. Cal looked down, smiling faintly. "But maybe that's enough for now." Sarah approached, clipboard in hand, her tone softer than usual. "You saved more than one state today. That's not small." Cal gave a small nod. "We lost good people." "That's how light survives," she said simply. "It burns what it must." The sun broke through the haze then, washing the desert in gold. Riley let out a long breath, her voice low. "After everything, I think I finally get it." "Get what?" Cal asked. "Why you keep going back into the fire?" He smiled, faint but real. "Because sometimes the only way out is through." The wind picked up again, cooler now, carrying away the last scent of ash. The desert stretched before them, vast and endless, and for the first time in a long while, Cal felt no ghosts, only quiet. Maverick's tail brushed the sand as they began the long walk back toward the waiting helicopters. The rising sun casting 3 elongated shadows, man, woman, and dog, across the reborn land, and somewhere deep beneath the earth, in the ruins of the relay, a single light on a broken console blinked once more, faint but alive. When the flames die and the smoke fades, what remains is not destruction, but the quiet proof that God never left. Sometimes His miracles don't come as light from heaven, but as strength inside the fire, in the hands of those who refuse to give up. Like Cal, Riley, and Maverick, each of us faces our own battles, some seen, some carried in silence. But every act of courage, every moment of compassion, is God's way of saying, you are never alone. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need hope tonight. Comment Amen if you believe God still works through ordinary people in extraordinary ways. And don't forget to subscribe so together we can keep sharing stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. May the Lord bless you and your loved ones, and may He light your path even when the world burns around you.